Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today I'm actually going to be using some of our new release from Make It Merry. I'm using the Elegant Floral Frames as well as the Holly Jolly background. And then I just picked out, these are some older sets. I think it's Pretty Poinsettias and then the Christmas Buzzword, the Believe. I wasn't really sure what my sentiment was going to be. I ended up going with the Christmas. So the inspiration for this card is actually my friend Michelle. She does this, and she does it every year. She does where she cases somebody else's card, but she makes it a Christmas card. And I have participated almost every year. Last year I did not because I was busy having Caitlin. But so this year I wanted to get back on track and participating. And so, I looked at a couple of her cards that I was inspired by. One of them had like a floral kind of like half wreath. One of them had this really dramatic background with some gold. And so those are kind of the things that I pulled from her cards. So here I've sped this up because it's ink blending. And so I just picked some like teals, blues, because I thought that would go really well with more traditional like red and green for Christmas. So I covered the whole thing in peacock feathers, and then I added shading around the edges with Mermaid Lagoon, Uncharted Mariner, and then the last one was Black Soot. And then I like to do mine twice because I feel like it gives me a much better blend. So I worked from lightest to darkest, and then I will work darkest back into my lightest so that there's kind of a center highlight in the middle where my focal point will go. And each time I'm laying down the color, I am putting it directly over the previous colors because they all kind of like tone each other. And I don't know, I feel like I like my results better that way. You could totally do some spatters in the background. You could use like an iridescent spray or a perfect pearls. I decided I was going to do something that I saw on another one of Michelle's cards, which was do a text background. And this Holly Jolly set is perfect for that. So I have my card on my little sticky mat. I am going to first ink this up because I wanted my inks to be matching, but Distress ink does not stamp well. So in order to get a better or a more solid image with my stamping, I inked it up first with our clear embossing ink, which just kind of makes everything a little bit stickier. And then I'll go over top of that with the Distress ink, and in this case I believe I chose to stamp in Mermaid Lagoon. I'll use our pressure tool to just give that really good pressure. But the other thing that I did want to mention about this background stamp is it has its own set of dies, which I kind of love because then you can cut sentiments out of the background or make your background more dimensional. So super kind of cool. Here, Honeybee in this release has come out with their own metallic inks. So they have a couple of pigment inks. They have a gold, a silver, and a white. And so since I had picked the card of Michelle's that had the gold accents, I was like, perfect time to try out this new ink pad. It is a pigment ink, so you either need to heat set it or you need to set it with an embossing powder. So I'm just going to add some clear embossing powder right over the top of mine to set it. I always have my heat gun kind of heating up off screen so that way I get minimal warping to my paper. Not that it really matters this time around because I'm going to be cutting this out with my die cuts. But this decision is what led to the topic of today's video, which is tips and tricks for coloring an embossed image with alcohol markers. So if you have alcohol markers, whether they're Copics or, another brand, you know that they'll color anything, which means if you color a heat embossed image with a alcohol marker, Copic marker, you're going to color your embossing, which can make for a little bit of trouble because first of all, you're coloring whatever your embossing is, and especially if you're doing it in like white, the gold is not as bad. But if you're doing it in white, then for sure you're going to be coloring right over your embossing, which it could totally be a look. But if you want your lines to actually show, like I did here, first things first, you're going to need to color in sections. We're going to have to try to minimize the amount of coloring we do on top of the embossed lines. And so by like this leaf, breaking it down into individual sections, we're going to have the least amount of ink that is getting onto our embossed portion of the image, so our detail lines. It will be harder with darker colors. Lighter colors you're not even really going to see necessarily, but darker colors will for sure color your embossing. So with that said, I always color lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. And I know it seems a little bit kind of crazy, but if you do it that way, or just darkest to lightest, if that's your thing, then your lighter colors will naturally kind of pick up the pigment that's sitting on top of those embossed lines as you're coloring with them. So it almost kind of cleans itself up. I do have another way to clean it up, and we'll get to that a little bit later. One of the other things that is challenging with coloring embossed images is when you color the embossing, that ink sits on top, which means you can pick it up with any other color that you go over top of it. So when you're working, you need to be sure that, like for my flower example, I'm going to color the center yellow and the outside red. Yellow is lighter than red, so I'm going to do my yellow first. Otherwise, I would risk bumping into that red and pulling it into my yellow center and just kind of muddying up the whole thing. So you want to work with your lightest colors to your darkest colors in both application and when you are mapping out your imagery. So speaking of the centers, I'm sorry, I'm going to do the other leaves first. I like color variation. You guys know that about me. So I did some yellow greens and then I did some green greens. This isn't necessary. It's just something I felt like that made it a little bit more interesting. Normally, I like to bring in some blue greens, so there's really a difference. But because my background is teal, I felt like that was probably not a good choice. It would just have been too much of the same color on top of the same color. So here you can see I'm working with 3 colors, which is my next tip. If you are worried about the images, because obviously when you're embossing the lines, you're making the portion that you color smaller, no matter if it's a big image or a small image. So if you're a little bit concerned about making sure that you're not coloring in your embossed lines, just work with less colors. You could definitely do, a 3-color blend or even a 2-color blend. You don't have to use, 4 or 5 or whatever. In fact, the little vine that's out to the right-hand side, I only did 1 color in that because those little leaves are so small. I just dotted in 1 color and it still looks fine. It's not missing anything, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think that it gives a really unique look. It's like cheating at no line, you know what I'm saying? Because no line coloring is pretty, can be pretty overwhelming or pretty challenging if you're not super familiar with it, but the look is stunning. And so doing an embossed image, is like cheating at no line because you can make that line any color that you want. So even something like this where we're using the gold, and Honeybee's gold is definitely more of a neutral gold. A lot of the ones that I've seen in the industry are more of a yellow gold. This one really is a good kind of like neutral gold color. But then it will give me this kind of no line look without me having to go through all of the effort of actually coloring it with no lines. They give me like a little safety net. So, I have been friends with Michelle, craft friends, the glory of the internet, for quite some time. We've known each other for a long time. She does do videos herself. I'm not sure how often she's putting them out though, to be honest. but she's always invited me to do this little challenge with her, which I think is wonderful. And I'm sure that it's probably like, what a great source of inspiration. You know what I mean? Not just for her because she's doing it, but for other people to be able to look at somebody else's card. And at one time or another, throughout, our hobby here, we've all cased somebody else's card, which is totally okay as long as you're giving them the credit for it. Like, that's, when you make art and you put it out there, I hope that I inspire other people. I hope that my creations inspire other people to make their own creations. But, turning them into something so specific, into a Christmas card, like for her, I mean, she's knocking out all of her Christmas cards in a really fun way. So I typically don't send, I don't send a lot of cards anyway. Y'all know this. You know this if you watch my channel. But I don't typically send out a ton of Christmas cards, but this is the time of year in which I need the most cards because I do give gift cards. I don't really like to, but that's what other people in my family like, and it's their gift, so who am I to tell them that they shouldn't want that? But yeah, so I do get a lot of gift cards, which means I need the cards to put the gift card into. Yeah. So here, like you can see, we're definitely covering up the lines quite a bit in this flower. And then I'm going to use these same colors. You could obviously do them a different color, whatever you're feeling. They'd be cute as yellow to kind of match the centers, or any other color you like. But I'm going to color the little flowers red as well. And for the smaller ones, I filled them all in with the lightest color. But for the smaller ones, I'm not really going to do too much shading. I'm just going to kind of add little dots of color. Filling it in with the lightest color just gives me kind of like a base layer because Copics blend within the fiber of your paper. So putting down the lightest color just really gives me kind of somewhere for it to absorb into because it's already damp. And for the colors to blend just a little bit better. But for the most part, I'm really, like these top ones, I'm not doing a full stroke or a color. I'm just doing a little bit of a dot. Because this color is strong for the reds, just because I like I like all bold colors. You guys know that. But it is a bolder red. It's not super soft. Bringing in that R59 is what gives us a ton of dimension, which makes it totally worth it to risk the darker colors. But you can see as I'm, going back out towards my lightest color, I completely skipped the R35 and just went to the R32 to blend them out. And this really is just going to help remove some of that color from my embossed lines. So now here is the trick for really removing the color. Get your colorless blender and a scrap piece of paper and take it and go over your lines. Don't continuously go over them. Go over a section, wipe off the color onto your scrap paper, and then go over the section again. And this will clean up all of that ink that isn't where we want it to be. And you can see for sure with this flower, like all of a sudden those detail lines are popping through where before they were completely in shadow because we'd colored right over top of them. You want to work in sections that are the same color. So like I went in and did all my red first, scribbled my 0 marker out until it was clean, and then went and did the green. The risk to this is that you may pick up some pigment and push it outside of your image because it is sitting right on top. When that happens, I just use the same colorless blender. I make sure it's clean before I go into the paper. And then I just use that to clean up any ink that got where I didn't want it to be. But this is a really kind of quick and painless way to remove that ink so you still maintain the lines of your image. But you're not, it's not super tedious and it doesn't take forever. You can just go in, like here I'm going in with the greens. I'm just going to scoop right over top of them. And then the same thing for all these little tiny guys. Right over top, swoop it once, scribble it off, swoop it once, scribble it off. And it goes by really quickly. but just be aware that you do need to be cleaning it off your marker in between. That's something that's super important. So here, these dies are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So you can cut them out as a whole, like an ornament, or you can cut out the inside like a frame. Like, talk about versatile uses, which you guys know I'm totally here for. So I will be using them as an ornament at some point, but for this one, in order to match Michelle's card, I will be cutting them out as a frame. So I got the outside set up, and then I'm going to take this inside piece, line that up, and cut that out. And then here's where we're at. I picked the Christmas buzzword. I thought that made the most sense for the layout that I had going on. And now I don't like the white outline. This isn't a secret on my channel. And I think that it's okay to not be the biggest fan. So I usually just colorblind to match my background. Sometimes that means that I am mixing colors, like I'll do a layer of one color and then a layer of another color. Here I'm just trying to find out what colors, because the first one I tried was a little bit too blue. So the next one was a much better fit. That was a BG23. So I'm just going to work my way. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. But I'm basically going to blend my markers just like I blended my background so that it will fit into the background nicely. Not that the outline can't be pretty if used correctly, but on this kind of dark, dramatic background, I just really don't love it. And it's my card. So I want to love it. So here you can see we've kind of worked our way out to what would be the darker areas, and it's blending in pretty nicely. I will go back in and do that same trick that I did with the colorless blender to make sure that I don't have any teal where I don't want it on my embossing. And again, the only thing I want to note before we move on about using the colorless blender to clean it up, don't scrub your embossing. Don't continually keep going over it. It is it's solvent based. So if you keep going over that embossing, it will weaken it or eat it, or take away the shine. So don't scrub it. Just remove the the color and move on. So here I'm going to use the same gold color to emboss my sentiments. I'm treating this with my anti-static tool, and then I'm gonna stamp them down. I did stamp them twice just to make sure that I was getting a good impression. I stamped most everything twice, quite honestly, probably because I came from a generation that only had acrylic blocks, so you only got like one shot at it. And now that I have a Misty and I can stamp it multiple times, I like to do that, so I do. You do whatever works. You do you, boo. Whatever works for you. So I am stamping that. You could totally pair this with I'm going to use clear again, but you could pair this with a gold embossing powder, and just really it would just really make sure your gold is super solid, because you would have the gold in the background as well as the gold in the embossing powder. But this totally worked fine for me, and I wanted it to match what was already on my card. So I'm going to stamp that out. I'm going to run this through. I trimmed the labels with just my paper cutter, but I'm going to use the little bee cutter here to cut out my Christmas. Love these little tabletop ones. So handy, especially for filming. And that will cut out my Christmas so that I can get it on my card. I did decide I didn't necessarily pull a picture from it, but Michelle loves her a kind of center design. And so that is what I am going to do. So I trimmed off my edges. She also really likes what do you call it? Where you have multiple layers, like the panels. There's a word for it, but I don't know what it is. In order to make sure I don't have just a white edge peeking through, I just went back in. I think I used either Black Soot or Uncharted Mariner, one of the darker colors, and just went around the edges to kind of color them in so I wouldn't have a white edge. And then I am going to use the gold. This one, so what did I cut the teal one to? I cut it to 3 3/4 by 5.5. So this one is cut to 4 by 5.5. Just so I could have multiple layers of cardstock that would kind of show through. And so, again, same process. I just smeared my ink pad right down on my white cardstock. I'm going to heat set it with clear so everything matches. Nothing new to see here, folks. I really like when everything matches and nothing is competing with each other, but they're complementing each other. Which really is a great general point of view for life. Like, I don't like when we're competing. I like when we're uplifting each other. So again, just going to heat set this until it is clear and smooth, and then I will be able to start building my card. Today, like, things have just been, I don't even know what I told you guys previously in the week. This week was just wild. But we are hoping to, it's beautiful weather here this weekend. It's in the 70s, little Indian summer for us here in Ohio. But we're hoping to take the kids to go pick pumpkins. Obviously, the 11-month-old will not be picking a pumpkin, but her brother has generously volunteered to carve a pumpkin in her honor since she cannot do one herself. And so our school district does like family fun nights where there's a night during the week that the kids don't have homework, like, so you can spend time together as a family. And for us, that is on Monday. That is tomorrow. So we will be hopefully carving pumpkins on Monday night. So here I've built up my layers, and now I'm going to finish assembling the card. I put the little poinsettia. It's not a poinsettia. Is it? I don't think it is. It's just a flower. It's just a pretty flower. Not everything has to be a poinsettia, Kelly. So I'm going to put this frame down in the center, and then I will just kind of build up my sentiment around it. I kind of split it into two because that made the most sense to me, and I did pop this up on foam tape, even though it took me, like, it took a while. It took forever to cut all these little foam pieces. Jennifer McGuire has that great trick where you cut multiple die cuts and stack them up. That is a fantastic trick. 5 stars would recommend, but I didn't want to do that for every single one of these because I have 4 different pieces parts. So I just suffered through with the foam tape. So here I'm going to overlap them a little bit. I'll have the Merry Christmas at the bottom since that is the heavier weight. And then at the top portion we'll say, from our family to yours, Merry Christmas. And I think that filled the hole in the frame quite nicely. And then I will further use our such good like gem stickers and pearl stickers that have come out. So I have the holiday pearl stickers that I will be using once I get these down. The other one I really super love is the Make It Merry gem stickers. It's got like these gold iridescent and like green iridescent. I don't even know what you call them. Like when they shine in the light, they look like pinkish and reddish, even though they're yellowish and greenish. I don't know. It's amazing. Check those out. So putting this down now, just using my tweezers, and everything fits really nicely in the center. I have those nice little panels making everything matchy-matchy. Here's where we're going to pull in the pearls. I did decide to go with the more like gold-ish ones. That just made sense to me. But yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to get some pumpkins, and then we'll be able to spend it not tonight. Tonight it'll be too late by the time we get back, you know, because they have like a corn maze and all that jazz. I'm sure Peanut's going to want to do all of that. But then Monday we should be able to carve pumpkins. So that will be fun. And it won't be too early because last year we did them too early and they rotted. So yeah, that's it. I put a little bit of shimmer and then I called it a day. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you learned a little something. I hope you'll go check out their new release. There is a blog post. I will link it below if you'd like to see Michelle's cards as well. And I'm excited to see what she made. So I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.